Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Lieberman, Food and Beverage Practice Leader at FOA & Son Insurance Brokers, and welcome to episode 5 of FOA & Son's Food for Thought. This is our monthly webcast where we tackle a different risk management topic, all related to the food and beverage industry. This month is dedicated to food and beverage importers, or really, in fact, anyone who relies on ocean carriers to transport finished goods or raw materials. We are talking about the alarming increase in container losses due to rough seas. We've seen a number of losses over the past few months, all in the North Pacific route. Today, my invited guest is Michael Hurd. Michael is the director at WK Webster. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on episode 5 of Food for Thought.
You're very welcome, Michael. I'm very happy to be here and talk about this. It's a good opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Michael. So Michael and I, we recorded our discussion last week. We'll switch over to that recorded discussion shortly. After the recorded discussion, I would ask everyone to please stay tuned. We are going to come back for a live Q&A to answer any questions that you may have. Any questions that you have, please use the chat tool on Zoom. We are also streaming this on Facebook Live, and we will be monitoring Facebook as well for any questions that pop up there. To moderate today's Q&A, we have Patty Devine here. Patty, say hello to the audience if you're there.
Hi, everybody. Just getting ready for the Q&A. Looking forward to it after the chat.
All right, so Patty, as always, just want to thank you for all the work that you and your team have done to bring this production to light. Thank you so much. I also want to just tell the audience another reason to stay tuned for the Q&A. We will be awarding one lucky viewer with a special gift from Italy. If you don't know about Italy, please check them out at italy.com. So we have a great presentation for you today. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 5 of Food for Thought. On November 30th, 2020, ocean liner One Apus encountered heavy seas, ultimately leading to one of the worst cargo losses on record. It is reported that over 1,800 containers have been lost at sea. Since then, various other losses, most involving the same North Pacific route, have occurred. We now approach 3,000 lost containers in just a short 3-month period. What is the reason behind the uptick in losses? How is the shipping industry addressing these issues? And what do owners of goods need to know if they find themselves impacted by this type of unfortunate event? I'm Michael Lieberman, Food and Beverage Practice Leader at FOA & Son Insurance Brokers, and this is Food for Thought. Today's guest on Food for Thought is Michael Hurd. Michael is a director at WK Webster and heads up its casualty and recoveries departments from the UK. Prior to joining WK Webster, Michael spent over 20 years at one of the international group P&I clubs, where he was a director, partner, and head of claims. Michael therefore has a wealth of experience over a very broad range of marine liability areas, including cargo, collisions, marine pollution, hull and machinery, ports and terminals, just to name a few. WK Webster has been offering marine and transit claims and consultancy services worldwide since 1861 and is widely considered to be the leader in its field. It employs a staff of over 230 colleagues at its hub offices in the UK, US, and Singapore, providing innovative claims and consultancy solutions to a broad and impressive list of clientele around the globe, made up of both insurer and corporate clients. These clients include some of the world's leading insurers, in addition to a number of well-known brands in the food and beverage sector. I would like to thank the team at Italy who stepped up to help surprise our guest with a gift. Our guest, Michael Hurd, is a lover of Italian cuisine, and there is no better way to satisfy your Italian food cravings than to take a trip to an Italy marketplace. It is truly the wonderland of Italian food. Italy is about eating Italian food, living the Italian way. Thank you so much to the team at Italy. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us here today on Food for Thought. This is episode 5, and this is a very timely topic that we're talking about today. I do want to first mention that our firms, FOA & Son and WK Webster, we do have something in common. Do you know what that is by chance?
Oh, I don't. It's not just our first names, although it is that too. But yeah, I noticed the other day we were both essentially founded in the same year, 1861. So we're both in this year on our 160th anniversaries, which is an incredible coincidence.
It sure is. So our listeners today are in for a big treat because they are getting, I think that works out to about 320 years of combined marine cargo experience coming at them today through this web series. So yes, happy anniversary to WK Webster, your 160th anniversary.
And to you, and to you.
So today, Michael, we are tackling the topic, and again, this is a very timely topic of cargo losses. So we have seen a lot of news recently about the seemingly uptick in containers going overboard. And of course, with the way news travels today, social media outlets, in some cases, there may be the appearance of something that is outside of the norm. Have you found that there is a identifiable increase in these types of claims, specifically containers being lost at sea going overboard?
Yeah, absolutely. If one just looks at the last 3 months' experience, we've seen 5/6 ships encounter essentially the same issue, and not only the same issue, but on the same shipping route, essentially the North Pacific route from China to the west coast of the US. It started in November. There was a ship called the One Aquila, which lost about 100 containers, a little more than 100. And then there was a very, very large one, the One Apus, which reportedly has lost over 1,800 containers. That's most of the deck stow gone or collapsed onto the deck. There were 3 others, the Ever Liberal, the ER Tianping, and then more recently, the one in January, the Maersk Essen, which has lost approximately 750 containers overboard. So when you think as a total, that's over 2,800 containers. And when you think that the annual average across the entire globe over the last 2 years is just short of 1,400 containers lost per year, we've seen double that loss in a 3-month period in essentially the same ocean route. So this is not an ordinary situation.
Can you pinpoint anything that's happening in the shipping industry that could be causing this uptick?
The typical areas that we would look to analyze is, first and foremost, the bad weather. At the source of all of these cases is the vessels hit some bad weather. Without which you'd say this wouldn't happen. I mean, that is undeniably true, I think. However, it's not just about weather. In fact, the weather isn't really that severe for these ships to cope with. But yes, there's some bad weather. But then we look at what the vessel does to mitigate the effects of the weather. Does it change course, direction, speed? How does it deal with the onset of bad weather? With all of the navigational aids and all of the weather reporting services that they get, what did they do to try and avoid or reduce the effects of the weather? We look at the loaded condition of the vessel when it set sail. Was it essentially seaworthy? Was it within the limits of its stability calculations, etc.? What did it look like when it sailed? That's a factor. An important factor is, especially in the container trade, is commercial expediency. These lines, they run to very tight schedules. They're in the business of making money, but also providing a service. And when you're heading at 16 knots into bad weather, who has the overriding decision there as to whether you just carry on going? Because you've got to make it. You've got to make it to LA before Christmas. You can't afford not to. So what impact does that have? There are ship design issues, which is a really important factor on these latest losses, these massive, ultra-large container ships, some of which, the largest of which, are sort of 400 meters long and 60 meters across their beam width. They're enormous. It'd be like laying the Empire State Building on its side. They're that size.
Now, obviously, the shipping lines have invested a lot of money into these larger vessels, so I can't imagine that we're going to go backwards and go back to smaller vessels. But do you know of anything, any steps that the liners are taking to avoid these losses from happening again? Does it go back to just, being smarter about moving around these storms, not encountering the rough weather? Or are they going to start shrinking the stack size so you don't have this violent, rocking in rougher seas?
Well, you're absolutely right. These ships, they cost an awful lot of money. They're huge, and it must be quite a disappointment to the ship owners to find that they don't behave terribly well in bad weather always, having invested all of that money. But that's not going to change, right? This is the new norm. So something's got to give, and it is going to be a combination of factors. Yes, you could reduce the stack heights, for example. You could do that. You could. That's one of many factors. You could do it just in the winter time, perhaps. You could say, well, in the bad weather routes in the winter, maybe you need to be carrying a little bit less. Maybe you need to be paying a little bit more attention to your stack heights, your securing arrangements. There are definitely things that can be done to, if things are done properly, this really shouldn't happen. For the most part, these incidents are avoidable, and they come about by a number of different failures. But for sure, they can't change certain things, but the design of the ships and the effect that has in the weather is always going to be an issue. But certainly they can take steps to reduce these occurrences.
If shippers don't have enough to worry about already, right, worrying about their containers going overboard, or God forbid we go back to the days when we see an increase in vessel fires, shippers have also been dealing with the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've also seen a shortage in containers. We've seen a recirculation of what I would classify to be older equipment coming back into the scene to make up for those shortages. Do you believe that plays a role in any of what we're seeing today with these container losses?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, everything you've just mentioned, all of these things are interrelated, right? I mean, when the COVID pandemic started, I thought lots of bad things were going to happen. People were going to fall ill, people were going to die. I didn't actually think that containers were going to fall off ships as a result of COVID. But essentially, that's what we're seeing here. All of these things are connected.
Yeah, let's talk about the one APIS situation. There are so many owners of goods who may not have had physical loss or damage to their product, but nonetheless, their product was delayed. How long of a process, when something like this happens, I think it would be important for our listeners to understand how long the process can play out. These vessels need to be, rerouted to different ports. The unloading process can take quite some time. I don't know the specifics on how long it has taken to offload the one APIS. And there are goods, especially in the food and beverage industry, that may have a short shelf life. You run into issues of delay. From a marine cargo insurance standpoint, that is a paramount exclusion, right? We are not going to pay losses due to delay. Now, of course, that coverage can be designed back in for those who are dealing with perishables or those who are dealing with a short shelf life product. You can design that coverage in for a premium. But can you just walk us through the timeline of, I heard some alarming reports that it took, somewhere around 20 days to offload, 100 containers from the one APIS. That is incredibly slow. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, you're right. It's still going on now. I mean, the one APIS, I think that occurred on the 30th of November, I believe, and it turned back towards Kobe in Japan, arriving, I think, on about the 8th of December from memory. And some days, it discharges, a handful of containers. But this isn't an easy task. I don't really criticise the owners for this. I mean, normally you'd send a gantry crane, would go over, and the spreader would come down, and it'd lock on, and it'd pick it up, and it'd move it off, and it all happens very, very quickly. But when everything is collapsed, you can't do that. So you need slings and chains to get them through the corner castings or underneath the containers. A lot of the containers are completely damaged. You know, the floors will fall out, the sidewalls, everything will start to fall to bits. So it's a dangerous and it's a long-winded operation. It's still ongoing now, and it's likely to take another few weeks before the 1 APIS is discharged.
Now, we keep on hearing about general average, or the possibility of general average being declared in any of these cases that we've seen over the past few months. What's your thought on general average? You know, do you think that there's going to be a declaration of GA? But also for our listeners, it would probably be very helpful if you could just also explain what general average is.
Yeah, I'll do that to begin with, because, you know, to me and to you, this is something that we deal with as part of our jobs. But for your listeners, these are probably two words that mean very little to them, perhaps. So general average it's an ancient concept that goes back literally thousands of years. But general average occurs when there is extraordinary expense or sacrifice that is incurred to preserve from peril the property in the common maritime adventure. That is essentially the classic definition of general average. But what that means in real terms is, if the ship owner, doesn't have to be the ship owner, but it's normally the ship owner because he's in control, has to spend money or sacrifice property, normally cargo, by jettisoning it overboard to save the voyage, then what is sacrificed or spent is essentially shared amongst all of the property interests, the ship and the cargo owners, in proportion to the values on board. Essentially, you know, you want this voyage to be saved, everyone's got to share in that expense. So losing containers overboard doesn't necessarily imperil the entire maritime adventure. It may imperil the cargo, but is it imperiling the ship? So there's a question mark essentially over whether these incidents were sufficiently severe to fall within the definition of general average. But actually, and for some other reasons, actually, even if they did, we don't think we're going to see a declaration of general average for either the 1 APIS or the Maersk Essen. In fact, I'm pretty sure we're not now.
Okay, and I think it's also important to let the listeners know that general average and the cost associated with general average when it is declared is something that is covered by marine cargo insurance, typically with no deductible applying. So any shipper out there who does not have marine cargo insurance because you think the loss will never happen to you, just know that you could be pulled into a general average situation, which you know, makes purchasing marine cargo insurance maybe a little more appetizing. So, you know, moving away from this type of loss, containers overboard. I know we here at Foe & Son and our loss control department, who's headed up by Nicole Brondy in our office, we do a lot of work trying to provide preventative measures that our clients can take when shipping goods to minimize the risk of loss. So I would love to get your thoughts, you know, so you can share with the audience on some guidance that you may have when it comes to loss prevention, you know, measures that, you know, our listeners can take when they're shipping goods to minimize the possibility of a negative event.
In the containerized business, the first thing obviously to do is to check quite carefully the condition of the container as it's delivered to you for loading. Now, it sounds obvious, but so often it's not done. It's not done well. Have a look at its general condition. Is it old? Is it rusty? Look for holes that might let in water, essentially. And how do you do that? I mean, you step into the container, you close the doors, you do a light test. Even small holes will shine through a little shard of light through the container roof if it's rusted or it's damaged. You can spray water. You can do what's called a water test and see if any water comes through. So you can do things like that. Look at the rubber door gaskets. Make sure that they're not compressed or perished, because there's another source of water. Look at the floor and the walls, the timber floor in particular. Is it clean? Check it for dirt, for debris, for any spillages, especially in the food and beverage industry. This is really important, right? Because we act for a number of household names in the food and beverage industry, and we know from our experience that, you know, if you've got something that's tainted by odor, a chemical odor perhaps, that's it, it's gone. You know, you're not going to be able to put that on the shelves. So it's really, really important in the food and beverage sector to make sure that the container is clean, it's odor free. Look for evidence of insect infestation. We're amazed at how often, again, particularly in the food and beverage sector, when you see infestation by insects, ants and such like. So look for any evidence of that. Look at the container corner castings. These are the bits, this is the structure of the container. The panels are just metal panels, but the corner castings, these are the things that hold the container to the ship. If they're cracked or heavily rusted, then you might find that they just pull away from the twist locks on the ship, and you've got a problem. So look at the corner castings. So that all goes to the sort of the condition of the container really. But what's really then vital is how the containers are packed. They've got to be packed adequately to withstand the rigors of sea carriage, and that's again stating the obvious, but it's not always a straightforward task. So securing cargo within containers is essentially the main point. If you're going to put boxes loosely packed in a container, they're going to fly around during the normal rigors of a sea carriage, and you're going to have damaged cargo. And there is a code on this. The IMO produce a code, the CTU code, which is a voluntary code, but it gives all sorts of guidance on how to pack containers, how to block and brace the cargo using timber chocks and straps and chains and wires, and reducing friction between pallets and the different materials that you can use to try and keep cargo essentially stationary in a container. You know, there's nets and strapping, and you know, there's an awful lot that can be done to ensure safe carriage. What I would say from my perspective is, if you can, take photos as well. Mm-hmm. We've all got phones now that take photos. So, you know, as you load a container, take a photo of it once it's complete, or even midway and then towards the end, so you have evidence of how well it's been packed. Because traditionally what happens is, if cargo is damaged, if the container is sound, but you open the doors at the other end and it's damaged, the shipping line will say, well, it wasn't adequately stowed, was it? There was obviously a problem with the way this cargo was packed. We need the evidence. So if you've got photos at the load port of really, when it was originally stuffed, of a really good stow, that is really helpful to us looking to recover that loss from the shipping line. And it takes seconds. It takes seconds to do.
Yeah, it takes seconds to do, or, you know, shippers can hire third-party, you know, surveyors to do pre-shipment condition reports, and they can do all that work for you.
Yeah, of course they can do that. That's always a good thing to do, but of course that comes at a cost. Not everyone wants to incur that cost, but you can do much of it yourself. You know, we see there are issues around things like condensation. You must have seen certain containers being moved between certain areas of the world, and
sure,
the timber that you use can give off so much, you know, timber pallets and packaging can give off so much condensation that the roof panel is absolutely dripping. And again, in the food and beverage industry, if you've got wet labeling on drums or jars or boxes, you can't sell that stuff. So right. You know, so we use dried timber. Some even use plastic packaging rather than wooden to try and reduce the incidence of condensation. And then there are things like you know, shock detectors, temperature detectors, devices that you can put in with your cargo to monitor all of that. So there's lots that can be done.
On episode 1 of Food for Thought, we actually tackled the cold chain, and we talked about the use of time temperature recording devices for refrigerated cargo. And how helpful that is to pinpoint where and when temperature abuse occurred. You know, when it comes to temperature abuse, I've also seen a rise in cases. I don't know if you're familiar with the flat-walled containers. They are supposedly the more eco-friendly containers. But you know, you don't have the corrugated container channels anymore. So you have these frozen cases packed straight up against the wall of these flat wall containers, and it's not allowing for the proper airflow around the product. So even though the reefer unit is working properly, everything surrounding that container exterior is being hit by the hot sun, and you're getting these hot pockets within the container. So I've been a big advocate of telling my clients, make sure that you provide, you have your packers put the spacers, in there to allow for that proper airflow.
Exactly right. Yeah, air channels on refrigerator cargo is an important. You've got to let the cold air flow. You've got to pre-cool your container. This is a subject matter in itself, frankly, isn't it, Michael? I mean,
it sure is.
About this for an hour just by itself.
It sure is. Well, Michael, you have been very helpful, and I really do appreciate you sharing your expertise. During our workup to this discussion, I did ask you a question about your favorite food item or favorite type of food. Do you recall your answer?
Yeah, I think I said that my favorite regional food, I guess, is Italian.
That's right.
And it's not just because the origins of your firm are Italian.
Well, look, it's become a tradition here on Food for Thought that we provide our guest speakers with a gift. So knowing that you're a fan of Italian food, we've reached out to Italy. Italy is pretty much the paradise when it comes to Italian food. They have locations all around the globe. And Michael, we learned from Italy that they are opening a brand new location in London. So you are going to be one of the first, if not the first, to receive a Italy gift card to use at that London location. So we just want to thank you. We hope you enjoy that. And we also want to thank the folks at Italy for helping us, get this gift to you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to you. Thank you to them. And it's been my pleasure today to talk to you about these things.
All right, Michael, take care. Thanks very much.
Thank you, then.
Thanks to all for joining us here on Food for Thought. A huge thank you to my guest, Michael Hurd. And thanks to Italy for helping us provide a special gift to our guest. To all of our viewers, please check out Italy by visiting their website at italy.com. To continue the conversation on marine cargo losses, marine insurance, and loss prevention, please reach out to me by phone or email. I look forward to hearing from you. And finally, thank you to all of our FOA and Son valued clients for allowing us to serve your risk management and your insurance needs. It's our honor to play a role in your food and beverage journey and your success. I'll see you next time on Food for Thought. Hello, everyone. So here we are back at the live Q&A. We certainly hope you got some valuable insights out of that discussion. Of course, the conversation that Michael and I had probably lasted well over an hour, and we had to condense it down to 30 minutes. So I'm sure there are some questions out there. Michael, I know that you and I kind of are somewhat conflicted about talking about this topic, mainly because, from a owner of goods perspective, there's only so much that an owner of goods shipping these containers on these large vessels can do when it comes to these types of events. But I think it's more about just awareness. I hope our listeners got that sense of awareness of that one, these things happen, and two, what does the process look like if you're involved in one of these negative events? So Patty, I know you were monitoring questions coming in either via Zoom or via Facebook Live. Do we have any questions from the audience that we can address?
We do, and I'm going to start kind of in the middle. Susan is asking, she's an importer of fresh fruit. So when there's, significant delays due to collapse, shipment spoils, is there coverage available for losses?
Okay, so we did address this during our call briefly, and it's a topic that's definitely deserving of more time. But when it comes to delay, delay is what is known as a paramount exclusion within marine cargo policies. So you may have an all risk of physical loss or damage policy. However, if there's physical loss or damage due to delay, those types of losses are excluded. However, when someone is shipping a product like fresh produce, where a delay can have significant impacts, there is a way in which you can design coverage back in for delay. There's really two things to think about, though, when it comes to delay. You have delay that leads to physical damage, which there is a possibility of arranging coverage for that. It would come at an additional premium in most cases. But then you also have delay that leads to loss of market, right? So you may have, if we stay in the food and beverage space, let's think about chocolate bunnies that are being sold for the Easter holiday. If there's a delay where you can't get those bunnies to market, there's no damage due to the delay. You just lost the opportunity to sell those bunnies at the highest possible price because you missed the Easter holiday. So you really have to separate those two things: damage that leads to or delay that leads to damage of your product. Yes, you can arrange coverage. You need to work with your broker in arranging that. A broker who really knows how to negotiate those coverage terms. But then you also have to think about delay that leads to loss of market. And that is a little more tricky to find underwriters who would be willing to take on that type of risk. Michael, in your capacity, do you have any insight or thoughts on this topic?
Well, yeah, you've kind of explained it all really, but you're right. The standard coverage terms exclude liability for delay, even if, or losses caused by delay, even if the sort of the starting point of the event is a covered incident. Delay claims that generally fall outside of cover, but you're right, you have to look at individual policies and see what's covered and what is not.
That's right. And I think when you're thinking about these situations like containers going overboard and having to reroute those vessels to different ports and the long unloading process that will ensue, yes, you're going to run into these delays. And if you have a product that is going to, eventually become damaged because of that longer time frame it's sitting in that container, you would almost be better off having your container go overboard, which is a far more simple claims adjustment than when you're dealing with strictly delay leading to damage. So Susan, I believe that question came from Susan. Susan, great question, and hopefully that provides you some clarity on that topic.
Great, thanks, Michael. So Mark has a question. Does a surveyor have any input on whether or not a claim is recoverable under cargo insurance?
I'll deal with that, shall I? I think so.
I think it's appropriate for you, Michael, for sure.
Yeah. I think the simple answer is no. I mean, surveyors are a very important part of the investigation process into losses, but they are there to investigate and to report. They're not generally there to decide on questions of liability and coverage. We partner with our insurer clients, and those decisions are made by those insurers, and sometimes with some guidance from us, but the surveyor is there to report and investigate, and that is normally the limit of their authority.
Now, Michael, one thing on surveyors and their involvement in the claims process, do you have anything to add in regards to salvage, where surveyors may become involved in arranging salvage offers from salvage buyers?
Yeah, quite right. So, I mean, WK Webster has its own in-house survey company, and quite a lot of their time is often spent arranging for salvage sales and inviting bids on damaged or discrepant goods, essentially. So that is an important part in mitigating loss, and all cargo owners, when they suffer an insured loss, are under a general duty to mitigate their loss. You can't sit and wait for losses to exacerbate by taking no action. So the surveyors that were appointed will generally help in giving guidance and arranging for salvage sales if that is what is required. Great.
Thanks, Michael. Patty, any other questions?
I have two more if you have the time. The first one is from Elizabeth. If general average is declared, who is responsible, the shipper or the consignee? I don't know how to say it. Consignee. Consignee.
Yeah.
Well, this is a bit of a complicated topic. Michael, it sounds like you have something to say, but it depends. My answer to this question is it all really depends on the Incoterms that have been used. That needs to be looked at very, very clearly. I actually had a situation with a client where they were shipping containers of frozen shrimp, and they were sending them to China. And they were selling those containers on terms where the buyer or the consignee had title and risk of loss of those goods the moment they were in the possession of the steamship company. However, my client had not been paid for those goods, right? So there was still a financial interest connected with that product. The goods were placed on the vessel. Something did occur. I don't remember the details of what led to the declaration of general average, but something clearly happened to the vessel where the vessel incurred additional expenses to save the voyage, and general average was declared. In that case, it would have been the consignee who was responsible based on the Incoterm, but the consignee in this case really just kind of threw up their hands and said, we're not dealing with it. And it fell back on the shipper who, based on the Incoterm, didn't have the responsibility, didn't have the risk of loss. And we got involved in somewhat of an arm twisting exercise with the insurer to back the shipper of these goods through various clauses within a marine policy that put the insurer on risk for that. But yes, I think in this situation, you really need to look at the Incoterm, understand who has title, who has risk of loss. And typically it's that party who is responsible for the GA. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, all of that is quite right. It's normally the owner of the goods, and so the Incoterms are important. But looking slightly beyond that aspect, that is often relevant to the question of who has to put up a general average bond to the general average adjuster or the owner of the ship, essentially, to secure the payment of whatever is due from that cargo in general average. But the more important document to that general average bond is the general average guarantee provided by the insurer. And essentially, provided the cargo is properly insured for that risk, then ultimately when the general average adjustment is produced and contributions are collected, it will be by reference to the general average guarantee provided by the insurer, which is going to be the paramount document. And questions of who is in theory responsible between shipper and consignee, they don't exactly fall away, because someone's insurance has got to respond. And if there's a seller's interest clause in a policy that responds to the unpaid seller, given the example you've just given to us, Michael, then maybe that responds, as opposed to the consignee's insurance if he had the obligation to insure the voyage. But where there is insurance, hopefully that will step in essentially to respond to the general average liability, if there is a liability to pay.
All right, so Elizabeth, thank you for asking that question. It seems like a simple question, but somewhat of a complicated answer. So of course, if you're not clear on that, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to provide more clarity. Patty, another question?
Yeah, we have one last question, and I think we can wrap it up in 5 minutes or so, if you guys don't talk too long.
Well, we also have the Italy gift for our one lucky viewer we need to get to.
Do that right now before the last question.
Let's do the last question, then we'll get to the to the Italy gift.
Okay, sounds good. Just to keep people hanging on. Okay, so this is actually from one of our listeners in Germany who happens to work with us. We know who that is. And he's wondering, just overall, like, how do these losses impact the marine cargo insurance market? You know, what's the big picture here?
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't know how these claims are going to play out yet. Right? We all of these claims are still under investigation. We don't know if it's going to be the owner of goods insurance coverage that's going to pay out. We don't know if the vessel insurance is going to pay out. But whatever the case is, we know that these claims are going to hit the marine market very hard. We are already, and we've been talking about this at Foe & Son for the last year or two. We're in a hard market cycle right now. after a couple of decades of soft market conditions, we're seeing decreased appetites. We're seeing increased premiums. We're seeing reduction of coverages. These are some of the things that we're dealing with on behalf of our clients. These losses are definitely going to have an impact. We don't know exactly how much of an impact at this point, but just to put this in perspective, and Michael, you maybe have more updated numbers than I have at this point, but when looking at just the one APIS, which happened on November 30th, correct? Or was it October 30th, Michael?
November, I believe.
Whatever the case is, if just looking at that one event that resulted in damage to, let's call it 1,800 containers, maybe more at this point, the estimated loss amount that I understood it to be was $50 million. That's a tremendous hit to the marine cargo insurance marketplace. So it's definitely going to have an impact. We don't know how much at this point, but it's something that we're monitoring. Michael, do you have any insight, not so much on market conditions, but the loss amounts related to these events?
Yeah, I mean, I think 50 million is a conservative estimate. My guess is it's going to be quite a lot more than that for that particular ship. But we're now looking, and since our recording, actually, there was yet another incident involving another ship, slightly different, because there was reportedly an engine breakdown which resulted in the vessel rolling and losing some containers. But we're now in excess of 3,000 containers in 3 months, and different people apply different sort of average values to containers, but it's going to be a large collection of losses, and it almost doesn't matter. Well, it does matter where it lies, but these are insurance losses that are going to lie somewhere with insurers, given the nature of reinsurance, etc. These are losses that are going to be borne by the insurance market, whether they're paid for by cargo insurers in the first instance, and then recovered from the ship owners' insurances, or whether they remain with the cargo insurers. Their losses are losses, and they affect the market.
Great. All right, Patty, if no more questions came in, let's move on to Michael. We can't let you be the only person to receive something great from Italy. So we have one lucky viewer out there. Patty, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Okay, so I've shaken the virtual hat over here while everybody was talking. And so it is a gift from Italy, and Jenny Davis is the winner. She was here earlier and I think she's logged off, but we will send her an email and get her mailing information so that we can send her a gift from Italy. So thank you everybody for attending, and it's been a pleasure. It's Michael's. And yeah, wrap it up, Michael.
All right, so look, congratulations to Jenny Davis. Thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Michael, special thank you to you. And of course, a special thank you to Italy. Please stay tuned for updates on our next Food for Thought episode for next month. Keep a lookout on that, and we'll start the registration process as soon as possible. But for now, signing off, and we'll see you next time on Foa and Sons Food for Thought. Take care, everyone.
Do